to me, between me and you. I feel a chemistry. I won't let no one come and take your place, 'cause the love you give, it can't be replaced. So no one else.
Welcome back to my channel. I'm trying to back y'all up some. Ignore the background. It's just one of those days where we were out of town last weekend and we're just so behind on cleaning and everything, and yeah, so that is the tea with that. I don't even know what's going on with my camera. Anyway, so what I wanted to say is I wanted to really do like a breastfeeding, kind of like what I didn't know and some tips. I feel like I tried my best to be as, what's the word? Up to date as I try to read up on breastfeeding. A lot of my friends said that was the one topic they felt very unprepared for, but this is something that I will say, especially if you're a first-time mom, you really can't prepare yourself for breastfeeding because every situation is so nuanced, so circumstantial, and the best advice I can give to someone that is wanting to breastfeed or going into wanting to breastfeed, because you know that is a choice, and whatever choice you make for your baby is the right one because you know your baby the best, and you want to have the resources. That's my biggest thing, is like follow some good Instagram accounts. I'll put some in the bio or the description, and have, you know, have a conversation with your doctor, his or her pediatrician, line up resources, and you want to have some mom friends that maybe have breastfed for a while to kind of like your go-to for those really one-off questions. That's gonna help you the best. Like I had a mom friend that had just was weaning when I was starting to breastfeed, so she had like a year under her belt, and she was able to really help me navigate that journey and have those questions of like, do I need to go to a doctor? Like, have you seen this before? Is this good? You know, and I was like in a breastfeeding mom group on Facebook, and people had questions in there. There's just so many different resources you can have when it comes to breastfeeding. So I will share some things that first I didn't really know, and then I'll share some tips. So if you see me looking down, it's because I have to write notes down, or my videos are just not organized at all, and I just will go off a rant. So these are like some topics that I just really wasn't aware of when it came to breastfeeding. And so the first one, people will say like feeding around the clock. You know, when you're in the hospital, normally they'll say like feed every 2 to 3 hours. But you have to realize the science behind that is that, you know, a couple things. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but I did breastfeed my baby for 17 months and kind of went, you know, the ups and downs, and learned a lot along the way. One, their stomachs are so small when they're born. They're like literally tiny, literally so small. And they're used to eating at like 24/7 when they're in your tummy. So having that perspective, I was always feeding my son. Like I think the first like 2 or 3 weeks, I was feeding him like 20 to 30 times a day. And when I tell my friends who are pregnant that, they freak out. But I wish someone would have told me that. Some babies are different. I had a friend that had like wake up their baby to feed them. Grady was like always hungry to this day. That's just how he is. Like he's always snacking, always eating. He has a large appetite. He's been like that his entire life, even after breastfeeding. He's always wanting all the food. So I think it definitely varies baby to baby, but keep that in mind that the 2 to 3 hours is really a guide to keep up your milk supply those first 2 to 3 weeks. You don't want to go longer than that. But I barely even could make it to 2 hours. And that starts from beginning to feed. It's like a contraction. So beginning of the feeding to the next beginning of the feeding. Because I was kind of, at first, before I was using an app, I was tracking it incorrectly. Another thing that I really didn't know about until I got into it was that, you know, pediatricians, are not going to be experts in everything, and you kind of have to advocate a lot when it comes to breastfeeding and probably even formula feeding, because that's just like a week of their training or schooling, if you will, himself for the most part. And I remember his pediatrician said that I think when Grady was like 8 months that he could have like an 8-ounce bottle of breast milk, which like isn't true. Maybe he was 6 months. He was younger. He was like 6 months. And I even like asked a lactation consultant about it, and she was like, normally breastfed babies don't need any more than 4 ounces because our milk changes over time and it can get more caloric. That's you know what I'm trying to say. Just like the milk will change over time. It's kind of crazy. I like forgot all about this because I've not breastfed for about 6 months. And so yeah, the milk will change over time, and it will be enough for your baby. So when you see people on social media that are like pumping like 10 to 20 ounces, that's not normal. Like that is like a small percentage of women. I think the most I've ever pumped was like 7 ounces at once. And I think I just like hit it at a right time and I was able to get a lot out. I never really pumped first thing in the morning because I always was with my baby. But I know the first pump of the day, you usually get a lot of milk, or like overnight is like the best for milk production. So that's something that you kind of have to go in and kind of, you know, get a second opinion if you feel like their pediatricians, like they need to be drinking more milk, because it's going to make you feel like you have a low milk supply, which really isn't the case. So always keep that in mind. Something that I really didn't know until as of recent, the past year, is how hard it is to wean on your body too, especially if you breastfed for a while. Like for me, I slowly was weaning. Like I went to 4 feedings for a couple of months, 3 feedings for a couple of months, 2 feedings for a couple of months, and so on. I was at 1 feeding a day for like 2 or 3 months. And I thought since I had 1 feeding a day, I'd be fine. But let me tell you, it took my body so long to get back to like its normal hormones, where so like when I got my period back, I got my period back 11, almost a year postpartum. So breastfeeding definitely like made my hormones imbalanced a little bit. And I could definitely tell because I gained weight when I was breastfeeding. I didn't lose weight. And so anyway, so I didn't lose weight. And so once I stopped breastfeeding, I started to lose weight, and I really didn't change my diet that much. Probably getting more sleep probably helped with that too. But anyway, so what was I saying? I heard something back there. Anyway, so then, what was I even talking about? My brain is already fried. When I was weaning, I had 40-day cycles. And I'm already on the longer cycle, like between 31 and 35 days, when before I got pregnant. And so then there were 40 to 45 days, but they were every 45 days. So I knew something was off. And then once I weaned, it went back. It's 4 months or 4 to 5 months for my cycle to get back to like 31 to 32 days, which I thought was very eye-opening. And I wish more people would talk about that, because I could definitely tell something was off with my hormones when I was breastfeeding. And now I know, because I feel like a different person now that I've weaned. It's like almost like getting off birth control for me. It's like my hormones were definitely out of whack. And then another thing is something I wish someone told me. So if you have a partner that's trying to help you feed your baby with breast milk, this is something that works for me. You know, everyone can do whatever they want. So I figured out pretty quickly that my husband just wasn't equipped to not have much sleep. Like not many people can do that. Like for me, I feel like I was able to make through, and I wasn't that mean. He just got kind of like an attitude quick. He just like couldn't function with that little of sleep. So what I decided to do was like, hey, how about you help me more in the day? Let me take a nap in the daytime, but I'll do the nights, because all I have to do is just put him on my breast and then call it a day. And I had a friend who her husband would make a bottle and then she would pump. So this is something that I would like to talk about, that is that everyone, you know, do whatever's best. But my logic behind that is like, why both be sleep deprived when you can just breastfeed? I know you probably want a break, but honestly, for me, thinking like logically, is like you would have to get up and mess with a pump. Like who wants to pump in the middle of the night? Like if you don't have to. So that's kind of like my mindset, and my advice is like the night feedings are really hard, especially when you're half asleep. It's really easy to fall asleep with your baby, like in the chair, in the bed, and I would just like be on my phone, like keep myself awake, because I did not want to fall asleep and God forbid something happened. So I was like on my phone, I had all my shopping during those hours, because I just did not want to like fall asleep, and the blue light like helped me stay up, which probably wasn't the best for my eyes or anything, but that was something that helped me get through those nights. And like, obviously when they're really little, it's gonna be frequent. And then as they get older, they sleep in the night. And now that Grady's almost 2, it's all hindsight is 2020, you know, but it's such a small glimpse of time. Like, it's like so small, and like the sleep deprivation when it comes to kids when they're young, and try to soak it in, because they're never going to need you like that. I know that's really hard to, like, if you're really in the thick of it, you're deep into it, you're so exhausted, you're sleep deprived, you might be battling postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. That's like my best advice, because now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm like, that was such a small amount of time when Grady was that small, and I can't even really, like, it was a blur, because I was so like postpartum anxiety won for me in that, because I just like could not wait for him to get older. But then now I get better. They wake up less and less and less, and before you know it, they're 2 and they're sleeping like 12 hours at night. You know, Grady's heard sleeping 12 hours at like 7 months. But yeah, it's a lot, those night feedings. So a couple of my tips is that it's gonna be okay with breastfeeding. It's really, really hard sometimes. That was like the hardest thing I've ever did. It's a lot of time commitment. It takes a certain, I wouldn't say like personality, but you just have to like, it's very selfless. And I'm not saying if you don't breastfeed, you're a selfish person, but it just takes a whole different level of being humble, being able to prioritize your baby. Like, it's just, I don't even know how to say this without coming off like, if you don't breastfeed, you're a shit mom. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that like the women that I know that have suffered with it, it's because like it just didn't fit in their life, because you're constantly having to be around your baby, and like you might have to go to work, or you might have to go on work trips or vacations, or you just like mentally it's just too hard to, like, you might have really bad FOMO, you don't want to like be attached to a clock. There's plethora of reasons to not breastfeed, and all of those are okay. Like, you don't have to have like, oh, my baby was allergic to dairy, you know, some crazy like, oh, you had to use formula. Like, fed is best. I formally believe that. But I wish someone would have told me that more, because I'm not saying I'm some amazing superwoman, mom, breastfeeder, yay, milk. It was just, I had to really prioritize him and the time, and I always had to do things like 2 to 3 hours, and to get things done, like just small tasks like working out, chores, like not only with like the time, like the medication too. Like, there's medications you can't take. When Grady was going to daycare, I got so sick to the point where like I was like, I am really suffering, and I can't take any of these, like, I don't know the terminologies, but basically like allergy medicine or like anything in Dayquil you can't take. It's not bad for Grady, but it can dry up your milk supply, or your baby, it can dry up your milk supply. And I was really terrified of that. I wanted to stop on my own terms. I was very stubborn with it. So I feel like it's just something I went into like not realizing the commitment and how much you have to breastfeed. And those are like the biggest takeaways I would want you to take from this video. It's a huge commitment, and that's not to scare you or deter you or to say if you can't do it, you're an awful mom. That's not it. But the more you know, and the more you know it's a commitment, I think the better off you can be, the more success you can have if breastfeeding is a priority for you and that's something that you're wanting to do. It is, like I said, it's commitment. It's a lot on your body. It's just, it's one of, like I said, it was one of the hardest experiences of my life, especially those 3 to 6, I would say, no, from newborn to like 3 months, it was the hardest for me. And then once like, it didn't hurt anymore, you're good. And then once you get into a rhythm, but then they get teeth. And then Grady bit me one time. Oh my God. He bit me when he had 2 front teeth and 2 bottom teeth, I think, or maybe it might have been 4 and 4. And I was talking to his, to my in-law, and I screamed so loud. I thought my area was gone. So I was like, that happened around like 10 or 11. No, I think it was like 13 months after he was 1. And I was like, oh my God, like I got so nervous. The more he got teeth, the more capable he could bite me really bad. So that was another reason why I weaned too. I had a lot of anxiety every time I fed him because of that bite. And it just worked out that he decided he was done with it. I was like, we done then, you know? So that's something that I was like, I just feel like that's everything in motherhood is like, once you learn one thing, something else happens. It's just like you're constantly evolving and constantly having to learn different things. Another thing that you're gonna need when you're breastfeeding is a huge water bottle, because one, you're not gonna want to have to get up all the time to get you water. You're gonna be so thirsty, like so thirsty. I went through so many bottles because I was like, I'm looking for the perfect one. It was before like the Stanley Cup addiction happened, and I was like, oh, if I wish I don't have a Stanley, but I have something similar. If I had this cup during postpartum, I'd have been so happy. I had just like a little like 12-ounce Yeti because I liked the size of it, but I was constantly having to get that refilled. And then a good position that works for me, especially if you're someone who's a little bit bigger, or even like I heard my friends who have C-sections, is a good position is the football hold. And that's where you have the baby like their heads this way and their feet are back here, and they're so small that you can like hold them like this. That really helped me to begin. That was like the only position where it wasn't painful. And then once I mastered that, I was able to get more confident and really like put my breast in his mouth and be able to really breastfeed in all different positions. And we figured things out as he got older. Like I would lean back and do that way. Like I just figured things out, because the football hold, after they get so big, it's kind of like they can't fit right here anymore. But as a little newborn, the football hold is so perfect. I love that hold. People always ask me about the holds, and I'm like, football hold is the best one to start out with, my personal opinion, and just get a lot of pillows. I haven't really experimented with a lot of the pillows, like the breastfeeding pillows that are designed for breastfeeding. I tried the Boppy, hated it. It's not for, if you're like above a size 6 in any type of boobs, it's not gonna work for you. I use that more as a pillow, and I used it more for like Grady when he was like practicing sitting up than I did breastfeeding, if that tells you anything. But yeah, this is basically just a little bit of an in-depth video about breastfeeding and what helped me when it comes to like emotionally, mentally, physically, just things I kind of went through. Obviously, I'm kind of far removed from it, and then hopefully one day when I have another baby, I'll be more in the thick of it. I'll make more of these videos of like how hard it can be, but just know that you're not alone, and there's community out there, and to have your resources. And you can definitely read about it if you want, but it's one of those nuanced experiences where you really have to like do it and then kind of like work through it and figure out like what resources are best for you. When it comes to like lactation consultants, your mom friends that have breastfed, just that's when you kind of know more. I think for me, like I read a lot when I was pregnant, but then having those resources while I had him gave me success in a lot of different things, including like breastfeeding, solid foods, allergens, all those things. Like having the correct resources for those helped me with my anxiety, because I was able to apply what I was learning directly then versus like a hypothetical situation when you don't even know, like, are you even gonna breastfeed, you know? So it's definitely like take those classes, get that fundamental foundation knowledge of everything, but don't get too, if you're like a new mom pregnant, don't get too like stressed about reading everything, because you'll learn. Like it just like your mom instincts just like kick in once you have a baby, and you'll be fine. Just know that you have the resources and you'll be fine, and there's nothing wrong with formula feeding. I want to make that clear. Sometimes I'm a little too direct and it comes off like I'm anti-formula, and that's not the case. I'm just sharing my journey and sharing what helped me, what didn't help me, my mindsets, and that's what my page is about. So I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.